Greetings, loyal listeners and new recruits. I'm Drew Deach.
I'm Travis Newton.
And this is Genre Vision. Every week, Travis and I review and recommend horror films, action movies, fantasy flicks, sci-fi cinema, and more. And this week, we saw The Invisible Man. Or did we? Yeah, we gotta cover this, man. It's the new Blumhouse big horror reboot, remake, whatever you want to call it. But first, we do want to remind everybody that we've got our FinFlix episode on Jaws 3D out, and we've really appreciated the response that we've gotten from it. I think it's one of the best episodes of FinFlix that we've done, but I think the even better version of it is available on our Patreon.
Yes, if you go to patreon.com/genrevision, you can sign up to become a premium subscriber. We've actually got a couple of different tiers now. If you sign up for $2 a month, you will have access to all of the premium exclusive content that we've made for FinFlix Seasons 1 and 2. And if you sign up for the $5 tier, you will gain access to not only all the FinFlix stuff, but all the other premium content we do, which includes monthly installments of extended Currently Consuming, pre-show warm-ups or kind of banter episodes that we do. And then there are also exclusive episodes on there as well. So again, patreon.com/genrevision.
And we did just finish recording the next episode for FinFlix Season 2 on It Came From Beneath the Sea. We actually had a really fun time with that one. I'm really looking forward to that episode. So if you like what we do here, go check out FinFlix. Last thing we want to say, because we haven't said it in a while, if you really dig what we're doing here on Genre Vision and with all our Genre Vision shows, please rate and review the show, particularly on Apple Podcasts, because from what I'm told, that's the one that matters the most.
Yeah, when it comes to ratings and reviews, Apple Podcasts prioritizes shows that are getting lots of good ratings and reviews, and will actually promote them. So this matters to us a great deal. If you want the show to reach more ears, please go to Apple Podcasts on your Mac, your PC, or your iOS device, and look for Genre Vision on the podcast store. Once you're there, you can give us a star rating, and you can also write a brief review. Tell us whatever you want, however you're feeling. Anything will be appreciated.
And unless you note otherwise, if you leave us a review, we will feature it here on the show. So thank you for anybody who does that. It really is the best marketing we can afford right now. But we need to talk about Leigh Whannell's The Invisible Man. I want to reference what is definitely in contention for my favorite ending in all of horror cinema. And those are the final shots of John Carpenter's Halloween. At the end of Halloween, as we all know, Michael Myers is shot. He falls out the window. Dr. Loomis looks over and Michael Myers is gone. But the actual ending of the movie is a montage of all the spaces that we've seen throughout the movie, the house, the neighborhood. It's just a montage of these empty spaces with the Halloween music playing and the shapes, very distinct breathing over the soundtrack. And this kept cropping up in my mind as I was watching The Invisible Man. It's a sequence that really gets across our fear of empty spaces and how we often will fill empty spaces with monsters, with boogeymen. Of course, that is a very literal thing that's going on in the text of The Invisible Man, but what's really impressive to me about the movie is how the filmmaking complements that concept. Throughout this entire movie, you know that, okay, there's an invisible man, so maybe I should be on the lookout for something going on in the background or something that's out of focus. But much more so than that, Leigh Whannell as a director is able to make empty spaces, sometimes just a shot of an empty doorway or the empty corner of a room, genuinely chilling.
If you don't know who Leigh Whannell is right off the bat, he's the guy in Saw who is not Cary Elwes. Basically, he's the other dude who's chained up in the bathroom. So he's the guy who, along with James Wan, wrote and conceived the Saw franchise, and I believe wrote the first 3 Saw films. After that, he then had a lot of success with the Insidious films. You know, him and James Wan kind of did their thing with that. And then Leigh Whannell directed the third Insidious film, which I feel is a pretty good movie. Then he went on to make this movie called Upgrade, which was kind of like a cyberpunk techno thriller, which is a very handsomely made low-budget film that was distributed by Blumhouse.
And it's the better riff on an idea like Venom.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And it has some kind of Verhoeven and Neil Blomkampy stuff going on. So that's nice. But when Universal was trying to reboot this whole Universal Monsters thing, the most unexpected announcement I got was, we're going to do The Invisible Man. Leigh Whannell is going to write and direct. And instead of it being part of the whole Dark Universe experiment, which failed fantastically, it was going to be done at Blumhouse, which is the production company that rebooted Halloween just a couple years ago for very little money and with a strong artistic vision. And that same concept applies here.
And they have been behind a huge... I don't think it's unfair to call it a minor revolution in the horror genre, because they put out plenty of movies that kind of come and go, but...
They just put out Fantasy Island. I mean, shit.
Sure, Fantasy Island, Black Christmas, Truth or Dare, plenty of movies, but Jason Blum is also the reason Jordan Peele has been put in the, I won't say Jason Blum exclusively, but Blumhouse has been behind and very supportive of Jordan Peele. They are doing things in horror that are very exciting and seem to be very creator driven. And a big reason for that is because they have figured out a model as far as budgetary issues are concerned, where they're not taking the biggest risks on these movies because they're not spending a whole lot of money. We were just looking this up before we started recording, and the reported budget, which is probably less than what was actually used, but still, this is impressive. The reported budget for The Invisible Man is $7 million. You could have told me this movie was made for $40 million, and I would believe you.
Yeah, they are squeezing every last drop of production value out of that supposed $7 million. Like you said, I think it was probably a bit more. But damn, really? I mean, let's face it. The Invisible Man is a dead simple concept. You don't even have to hire a guy to play him if you really want to do it that minimally. But the cool thing about all of the Invisible Man movies that we've gotten, the high profile ones, at least, the Memoirs of an Invisible Man, the John Carpenter film from 1992. Then, of course, the, classic Universal Invisible Man. Like, these are ambitious effects films, every single one of them. Every single one of these high profile Invisible Man movies is going to embrace some sort of cutting edge technology to make their Invisible Man happen. But in an era where we can pretty much make anything with computer generated imagery now, I think the approach to making The Invisible Man as sort of a techno thriller is a cool approach to, like, well, okay, how is the character going to use the technology to do what they want to do?
Well, I think, and we should state that we're calling this Leigh Whannell's Invisible Man because he has the sole story, screenwriting, and directing credit. And part of that Blumhouse model of keeping the budget low allows filmmakers, I think, to really come in and have a distinct vision. Sometimes that vision doesn't work out, but in the cases it does, wow. And I really see a vision behind Whannell's version of The Invisible Man. And that certainly starts with the basic concept, because unlike other stories that we've seen, like the Claude Rains version or Verhoeven's Hollow Man, this is a story that is much more rooted in another lead character's performance and arc rather than the invisible character themselves. And in this case, that is the character of Cecilia, played by Elizabeth Moss.
So the movie starts out with a really glorious opening credits sequence.
I mean, this is a new movie, so I don't know how spoilery we want to get, but I'll say this without spoiling anything. This opening sequence should be taught in film school in how to introduce characters, the basic plot of what you're going to be involved in. A whole bunch of information happens in this opening, I want to say maybe 3 minutes or so, with next to no dialogue.
So After this rather astounding opening credit sequence, again, very, very simply executed, but beautifully done, we are introduced to the home of Dr. Adrian Griffin, who lives in this gorgeous seaside house, very minimalist, modern, very ex machina, similar to the kind of stuff we saw in Upgrade. Adrian Griffin is this brilliant scientist who owns this optics corporation, and he's played by Oliver Jackson Cohen, who you might recognize as one of the kids, the grown-up kids from Haunting of Hill House on Netflix. He's not all that important, though, because he's not our perspective character. Sure, he's the title character, but this whole opening sequence is built around the perspective of his live-in girlfriend, Cecilia, like we said, played by Elizabeth Moss. And in this opening sequence is her escape from the abusive relationship she has with Adrian.
Well, again, I mean, this is the opening of the movie, so I don't think this is spoiling anything. And it's if you've seen any of the advertising, you understand the basic gist of the story. This all kicks off right away, and I was so pleasantly surprised that this is how we're getting introduced to the story. We don't have to spend like 10, 15 minutes just seeing, okay, this is them getting married, and this is the relationship crumbling, and we see how abusive he is and everything. It starts the story off at kind of the most exciting point.
Yeah.
As far as Cecilia's arc is concerned.
And all we really need to know about their relationship is just how frightened Cecilia is of this guy. I don't think this is a spoiler, but this isn't about the substance of their relationship and like the day-to-day life of their relationship. It's really all about the fallout of this abusive dynamic between the two of them. He is a horrible, controlling abuser, among other things, and she is finally getting the fuck out. And this escape is so beautifully orchestrated. And it's all sort of basic language of horror films that we've seen before. Like, one of the points I made to you is that this is built often on the whole paranormal activity gag of you're seeing a still, quiet space with a lot of negative space in it, and you're looking for the threat. The whole conceit of this movie is that it could be anywhere. And it really does a fantastic job of setting you on edge. I was never so disturbed by, just the thought of a guy in a movie than I think I have in this one. I mean, this is really, really astounding in that just the thought of this guy being in the room, a guy you don't even know. He's just a specter, just his presence implied or not even. Ugh.
Well, we only really see him in this opening sequence, and I won't spoil how that goes down. But after this opening sequence, we spend time with Cecilia, and she's staying with a friend and his daughter, and she's very, very terrified of even leaving the house. She believes that Adrian is having her followed and is stalking her and all this stuff. And again, I don't think this is a spoiler. This has been in the advertising. It's the crux of the idea. It's revealed that Adrian has committed suicide. And as far as Cecilia is concerned, he's gone. She's going to inherit money from his estate, and she thinks that she can get her life back on track. And then all these strange events start happening, and she starts to believe that Adrian is not dead, that he has somehow managed to make himself invisible and is torturing her and setting her up to basically drive her crazy, to make it seem like she is losing her mind and also that she's doing things that she's not doing. And I think we'll talk more about those specifically when we get past the spoiler wall.
Yeah.
But when it comes to approaching remakes or reboots or whatever you want to call this is, I think, in the same class as far as how you're approaching the material as something like Carpenter's The Thing or Cronenberg's The Fly, where they take the central conceit of the story and have a very distinct new avenue in which to pursue the story.
Right.
Because this is not like any other Invisible Man story that I've ever known of. It basically just takes the title and is like, okay, I know I have to have an Invisible Man in my story. What kind of story do I want to tell with it? And the story that it tells is really good.
Sure. It's exactly the kind of approach that we saw in David Cronenberg's The Fly. It's like, well, what's the central conceit? A scientist turns into a fly. And that's the same thing here. A mad scientist does indeed manage to turn himself invisible. The huge switch in terms of perspective, though, and really not exploring his perspective at all in the film and just having him be a monster is a really, really cool idea, particularly when you're rooting it in the headspace of Elizabeth Moss's character, who, for the most part, I feel is very realistically portrayed. You know, there's a really delicate approach and a really thorough approach, I think, to her psychology in the film, you know, in terms of, you know, like, what is the motivation for her action? Why is she doing this? Why does she feel this way? I think Whannell and, you know, whoever else might have worked on the screenplay put a lot of thought and certainly a lot of effort into making all of that work from her perspective. And yeah, she does things in the movie. You know, I had people around me in the theater going, "Oh, why would you do that? Why were you, you know, that's stupid." No, I think for her perspective, you know, a lot of the time she's playing a woman at the end of her rope.
I mean, even more so, she is somebody who is experiencing PTSD from the relationship that she believes she's escaped. And just when she thinks that she is getting over that trauma by him being dead and her having this money come to her, that's when the invisible shenanigans start up and really start chiseling away at any hope for a sane life that she thought she might have had. And there's a number of sequences in that. But, you know, before we start getting into spoilers, there's a couple things I do want to note on. We have to talk about the filmmaking. I've liked Leigh Whannell's directorial efforts so far. I think they've each gotten better, and that's certainly true of The Invisible Man. But this is a contender for saying, let this guy direct anything, because he does things that we just don't see in a lot of modern mainstream horror fare, especially ones attached to somewhat notable IPs. That there's so much in this movie that plays out in wide shots.
Yeah, it really is emphasizing the negative space. They'll use the wide frame. They'll put Elizabeth Moss on one side of the frame, and you just know that because there's negative space in the frame with her, that we're supposed to feel scared. And it doesn't ever feel hacky. It doesn't ever feel like a cheap trick. It really does do the trick every time.
It's not just stationary shots. There's a great sequence where it's a tracking shot where she's walking through this house and she believes Adrian is there somewhere. Mm-hmm. And you could do that shot very easily by just, okay, let's have like a medium or a bit of a close up on her close so we can see her face and everything. It's like, no, it's a wide shot with her walking completely, from right to left of frame and letting things in the background. There's one shot when she's walking through that house where there's just a drape over something in the background. And I was like, oh, that looks like a person. Was that it? It's never highlighted upon, and it doesn't end up being it. But that was just the power of both the filmmaking, the design of a lot of the sets, the dressing of those sets. It's phenomenal, understated stuff.
But it's still relying on like old school haunted house tricks, though.
Sure.
You know, mannequins draped in sheets, floating objects. You know what I mean?
I mean, it's all stuff that's tried and true, and that can certainly come across, I think, to some people as cliched. But it's all about how you utilize those tried and true elements to craft something that feels fresh, especially in a current market. And that's the thing, is The Invisible Man feels fresh. It doesn't feel showy, but it feels polished.
And it does have a distinctly art house edge to it. The way that it's edited and the way that it's paced is not something that you're going to find in your typical "there's a scary man coming after me" horror film in theaters. Like the length of this is a couple minutes over 2 hours. I think 2 hours and 4 minutes, 2 hours, 7 minutes, something like that. And it's really methodically paced. It's like a 5-act movie. Like, there were a couple times where I thought like, oh, the movie could actually choose to have its climax here at this location. And no, and then it would go to another location and there would be sort of another wrinkle. And then no, they had to take one more act and incorporate, this is how we're going to tie everything up. I was really impressed with how the movie managed to sustain itself by having substantial things to do to warrant that running time. But even then, like, if they wanted to trim a few of the longer shots and, kind of cut the mood out of the thing, they could have done it, but the film would have suffered.
I agree. I think there is a shorter, tighter version of this movie, but I think it's a less effective one. I think that length is important for not only mood, but also really great character stuff. Not just from Elizabeth Moss, who is an incredibly dependable actress. Her performance is great. Cecilia is a really good character. But I love, one of my favorite things, I think I was the only person laughing in the theater, but it was from joy, like instantly falling in love with these characters, is when she's staying with her friend James, played by Aldous Hodge, and his daughter, Sydney, played by Storm Reed. And she's just found out that she's going to have this money, and she's put some money into an account for Sydney to go to fashion school. And they're all kind of just pillow fighting each other and saying some fun stuff. And I just started laughing because like, oh, I love these people.
Aldous Hodge, like his character, there's a couple of problems that I have with his character, but he exudes this familial warmth that is just so, I don't know, almost addictive in the movie. Like, I really liked having him around.
He's such a good friend.
Yeah, well, the way that we see him supporting Elizabeth Moss's character in such a kind of brotherly way is, I don't know, fantastic. It's heartwarming. It's wholesome.
It's not saccharine, though.
Not at all, no. And I think they kind of have to have a little bit of standoffishness in that, a little bit of, almost kind of dark playfulness in their relationship. And then there's this other factor. The person who actually helped Cecilia break out of Adrian's grasp initially is her sister, Emily. And you can tell from almost the first scene that they share together in a car that their relationship is kind of fraught and they have a bit of a history of maybe not getting along.
Yeah, and I will say her sister, who's in the movie, not a whole lot, but the few scenes that we get with her, we can tell that she's steely. She's kind of a hard ass when they go to the reading of basically the will, the estate, and she finds out she's going to get this money. She's there acting as her lawyer and is really comes off as hard-edged.
Yeah, I got some hard-ass attorney energy from her. It was pretty good.
Yeah, but it's totally from I don't know if this is a spoiler, but there's a note that Adrian has left that his brother, who is the executor of his estate, starts reading, and sister just cuts it off. It's like, nope, you don't get to do that. You can email me a copy and then we'll read it. Okay. And I was like, that's good. I know who these characters are, how their relationships act without them having to outright state it to either each other or basically the audience. It's really, really smart character work from the script level that's enhanced, I think, by the whole cast. I think this is a really well cast movie.
Yeah, exceptionally well. And one of the reasons I think they had to build this support system for Cecilia up so well is that it really means something to us when that support system starts to crumble. As you very well know, if you've seen any of the trailers or you know the conceit of the film, she is being stalked seemingly from beyond the grave by an invisible man who may in fact be Adrian. And this whole goal is to, seemingly at first to just antagonize her, to drive her nuts. And there's something about this that doesn't add up. We'll get there, but this whole method is basically to distance Cecilia and to knock out all of these sort of, support systems and to isolate her. And it's the same kind of abusive methodology that we saw, or actually, no, it's the same kind of abusive methodology we didn't see, that the film is taking the time to build up and saying, like, this is the model for the relationship that Cecilia and Adrian had. It really does quite a bit of smart storytelling about their whole relationship without ever flashing back to a scene of them as a couple.
Yeah, I mean, we do have to have that information told to us, but I think by Cecilia, but I think those moments are mined not just for exposition, but for good character and psychological building.
Yeah, well, like the text of that scene is about, exposition, but the subtext about it is like the mistrust between these characters. It's like, why have you hidden this information from me? Why didn't you feel comfortable telling me this? So there's a lot going on there.
Oh, again, it's the facing of the trauma.
Yeah.
So we are starting to veer into, I think, where we're going to have to start talking about spoilers. So before we do that, I think some non-spoilery technical stuff we can also talk about. I do want to talk about the score because it's done by Benjamin Wallfish, who, if you are regular listeners of this podcast, know that his score for A Cure for Wellness is probably my favorite score from the last decade. It's definitely a contender. I like the music in The Invisible Man. I think it's a good score. There's a couple times where it's doing some pretty heavy lifting as far as going for big scare stuff.
Going for big scares. There's like big sort of electronic shrieks and buzzes. And, you know, we heard kind of similar stuff from him in It Chapter 2.
In both It movies.
And in both It's, but it's way more effective here because of the technology angle. Like the synthetic aspects of the score totally work.
I agree with that. I don't think it's a bad score by any means. I think it's a good score. But I think because this is a movie that has, I would say, a very fair amount of jump scares, and all those jump scares are pretty much, I won't say all of them. There's a couple that are not assisted by the usual big musical stings.
There's a couple screaming fishes. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, that's an inside. Go listen to our Finflix episode on 47 Meters Down Uncaged to get that reference. But yeah, and the only other technical thing I want to talk about was the editing. I'm glad this movie, like we talked about, is 2 hours, 40 minutes. I think the edit on it, like you said, is very
2 hours, 4 minutes.
2 hours and 4 minutes, sorry. I think the editing is not leisurely paced. I could see people having that criticism of it. I think it is very deliberate, and I think it shines the most during the scenes where we know Adrian is in the house or is in a room or something. There's a great scene where Cecilia is just talking to a doorway as if Adrian is standing in it. And the editing of that scene makes that scene for me.
Yeah, I had a very bizarre flashback to that one time that old coot Clint Eastwood started talking to a chair on stage. But the fact that this scene was doing such good work, because it really does imply that that Adrian is there in that scene, and you feel that this moment is happening with this character where she's actually able to get some things out. And because she is alone or feels alone in that moment, she's at the end of a rope and she's thinking, fuck it. What's he going to do? Come in here and kill me? He's pretty much already done that.
Well, I think we can cross the spoiler wall here. But before we do, if you can't tell, we're very excited about this movie. And we're only going to get more excited because now we can talk about all of the specific things that excited us about it. So here be spoilers. There were 2 moments in this movie where I outright gasped. And when I say gasp, I mean loudly went, oh, in the theater. And I'm sure I sounded like an idiot, but it was that affecting to me. And they're not jump scare. I guess you could partially read them as jump scare moments.
They're things that happen suddenly, but they're not accompanied by some big loud sting.
No, and it's more sudden because they involve violence and because they involve just shocking things that I would not, that may not seem shocking to some people, but for me is shocking to see, and emphasizes that this movie isn't going to pull any punches. Literally, one of those moments is where Storm Reed's character, who is James's daughter, her and Cecilia have a very kind of sisterly relationship. They sleep in the same bed together while Cecilia's staying with them. She's helping her to get to college and everything. And there's a moment where Cecilia is laying on the floor in a fetal position, sobbing her eyes out because she believes Adrian is invisible and is tormenting her. And Sydney comes in and comforts her and says something to the effect of, yeah, we should, bust out of here and go get some cake and have a girls' night out, and trying to make her feel better. And it's a really warming moment. It's like, this is exactly what she needs to hear. And when she leans down to help Cecilia get up, she gets punched in the face.
Yeah, and let me tell you, this invisible man in this movie, he can punch like a motherfucker.
Oh yeah, well he's augmented by whatever crazy camera suit that's going on, so he's got some gear behind that punch. But regardless, the shock of that moment, and of course, Sydney believes that, oh my God, Cecilia did this to me, which causes, another rift in her support circle. This moment absolutely set me on a point where I was like, this movie feels dangerous.
Yeah.
The other moment, which absolutely I think is gonna go down as one of the moments of 2020 for me in movies, is Cecilia breaks back into the old house and finds out that, yes, Adrian developed this optic suit, which the design on that thing is super simple but super cool. It's very Metal Gear Solid.
And it's very creepy. There's this moment early on in the film where she's trying to escape and she walks past Adrian's laboratory and she walks past the little chamber where the invisible suits are being kept, although you can't see them. But you see this rack with all this with these clamps on it. And you think, what the fuck is that? Is that some kind of machine that's going to turn our boy invisible? Nope. It's got a suit hung up there, and every little hexagonal panel in the suit has this little camera lens in it, and they tick. They make this little clicking sound. So she walks past this chamber during her escape, and it starts clicking and ticking at her, and you're like, ugh, what the fuck is in there?
And it sounds like an electrical fizzle.
Yeah, it's not a nice sound.
But so she breaks back into the house and finds this suit. She hides it away in the bedroom closet. And then she contacts her sister, who Adrian emailed earlier in the movie from Cecilia's account, and imitating Cecilia basically said all this stuff like, "You're smothering me. I hate you. I wish you had died instead of Adrian," and just all this horrible stuff, of course, which her sister believes Cecilia said. So she meets up with her at a restaurant, and she's still very icy, and Cecilia is frantic and everything. And she's saying, "I found something that proves what I'm saying is true." And in this moment, because her sister, Emily, played by Harriet Dyer, believes that Cecilia said all these horrible things, she's being very icy towards her. She's being really shitty to the wait staff, which I felt kind of like, I don't like that. Like, don't be mean to waiters.
Well, I mean, they make the waiter out to be kind of a tool. Like, I love that moment where the waiter's like, "So is this your first time here? Well, we do things a little bit different here."
Oh yeah,
everything's family style.
This was shot in Australia, but it's set in San Francisco. I'm like, I've been in that restaurant, man.
Everybody's been in a restaurant that does things a little bit differently,
right? So I mean, he's reciting his script, man, but he's not earning a living wage. Don't treat him like
Poor
shit.
Taylor.
Yeah. So, but she's being icy. But then they start to joke a little bit, saying, Emily says that, "Oh, I could kick James's ass," and Cecilia laughs and says, "Yeah, I believe it." And then Cecilia says, "I have this proof. He made this suit that can turn him invisible." And then there's a cut to Emily, and then she kind of has a little bit of a reaction, like, "What the fuck?" Cut back to Cecilia, and there is a knife just floating in the air next to her, and Cecilia doesn't see it and goes, "What?" Zip. The knife slits Emily's throat there in the restaurant, and then the knife is put into Cecilia's hand. I cannot believe that moment, because this was the one time in the movie where I thought the pacing started to drag. I'm like, okay, she has the proof now. She's having this scene with her sister. We're going to get through this and things can get rolling. And the movie, as soon as I had that thought, the movie was like, "I have you right in the palm of my hand, and now I'm going to rip your heart out."
I felt that exact same thing. I was like, okay, the movie is allowing me to relax a little bit. And as soon as I felt that sensation, the rhythm of the scene completely changed. And before you know it, Emily's dead. Just bled out on the fucking floor of the restaurant. And what's amazing, I had a really vocal audience, I guess you could say. And I almost always take issue with people talking in the movie theater for whatever fucking reason. But I had two teenage girls behind me, and some of their commentary was actually kind of revealing as to what like normal people think about movies. And one of them said, at the moment where the knife was floating next to Cecilia's head, "Oh, she's dreaming."
Huh.
Right?
Okay. Word.
You know, people are presented with this kind of surreal image, and they think like, "Oh, okay." You know, the reality of the movie is starting to fall apart. When in fact, what, I think Leigh Whannell wants the audience to feel is like Cecilia feels her own reality is falling apart. Like that's the whole, I want to drive Cecilia crazy thing.
Hmm. I mean, so this eventually gets Cecilia committed, and we find out that Adrian's brother actually knows that Adrian faked his own death, and Cecilia, who was taking birth control while she was with Adrian because she didn't want to have a child with him, turns out that he knew she was taking birth control. He switched it out, and she is pregnant with his child. And Adrian's brother is saying, "Look, you don't get any of this money if you're convicted of a crime," which you are now convicted of not convicted, but charged with killing your sister, and you are mentally unfit, so you're not going to get this money. But if you keep the baby, this will all go away. And if you go back to Adrian, everything will be fine. And I love this scene where Cecilia calls him out and says, "You're exactly like him. You're the jellyfish version of him. All you lack is the spine."
Yeah, my audience reacted as though that was a sick burn, which was funny because as soon as she said the jellyfish bit, I heard an audible, huh. And then she goes, "No spine." And then somebody was like, "Oh, shit." It was weird. Like, there's one scene when she's alone at James's house early on in the film, and she's kind of like, I don't know, I think she's like hanging clothes up in her closet or something like that. And we see the empty space behind her, and Cecilia senses the empty space behind her, and she just sort of gets instinctively freaked out. And this older dude in my audience, somewhere down near the front rows, went, "Fuck off, dude."
Yeah, sounds like he would enjoy being an invisible asshole.
He sounds like a Subway masturbator, frankly. But
I'm going to talk about, and this will come back around when we get to the climax of the movie. I thought I was going to have a big problem with this movie.
Oh,
because, as we've stated, the movie kicks off with Cecilia escaping from this relationship. It's literally like the first scene of the movie, and very shortly afterwards, Adrian is declared dead, and then invisible shenanigans begin. And I was like, okay, I see. They just want to paint this guy as nothing but a monster. And that's working because the filmmaking is really good. All of the other character stuff is really good. But the monster's not going to be a character. He's just going to be a monster. And that's fine for this particular movie. This is more of a personal preference on my part than a fault of the movie. But I was like, I want this guy to be a character. Like, I get it. We've validated everything that Cecilia has said about him by seeing his behavior, obviously. But he doesn't speak hardly in the movie, save for one or two creepy little lines while he's invisible. So he's just a presence. And it's like, okay, well, that's Michael Myers in Halloween. He's not really a character. He's a presence.
Right. But they do make you feel like, regardless of whether or not they actually kind of build him up to be a character, they do make him what feels like a substantial presence. They make you hate him.
That is completely effective. And that's why I say it's not a dig against the movie. This is just me. I'm like, oh, I want a scene with this character.
Mm-hmm.
And again, when I was thinking about that towards the end, the movie swung around and gave me that. And it was immediately like, yes, this is all. I didn't need a scene to better humanize this person or give him any ounce of sympathy. I just wanted him to feel like a character.
Yeah.
And that happens at the end of the movie. Which I think we'll talk about in a second. But before we do, we have to talk about the effects aspect of this. And we didn't really talk about it before spoilers because for the most part, it's an invisible dude doing invisible stuff. And there's some really creepy, fun, simple ideas. Like he pulls the sheets off of the bed Cecilia's sleeping in and takes pictures of her. And when she wakes up and tries to pull the sheets back, he's standing on them, so we just see these footprints on the sheets, and then slowly the footprints start walking closer and closer to her. Super simple, like you're saying, Paranormal Activity idea, executed extremely well.
Mm-hmm. I mean, they were even doing stuff like this in, I think it was the first Conjuring, where a sheet blows off a clothesline and there's an invisible presence implied, shown, beneath the sheet for a moment, and then the sheet blows away.
Right.
And it's that same kind of stuff, but here it's executed, I think, with a distinct menace that the other films didn't have. You get the sense that this isn't just some sort of formless demonic, spook that is there just to yank little girls' legs in bed. The human motivation of things like taking photos of her while she sleeps. Ugh. Mm-hmm. I mean, so deeply disturbing.
Or earlier, we see a knife fall off of a countertop, and later we see that knife is being held in a plastic bag in the attic where Adrian's phone also is. And when Cecilia discovers the phone, a text message comes through, obviously from Adrian, saying surprise. It's like, oh yeah, this is what it would feel like to be terrorized by this particular invisible man. And again, I didn't know if I wanted to get into this part of the movie. We talked about it privately, but we might as well, because we've outed ourselves about this with other recent movies we've done. This is a movie that I love in terms of it has a message. It's a very, very direct and obvious message. It's talking about female fears from men, about toxicity, about gaslighting, about the very specific paranoias that women have in terms of how men will react to them, to women rejecting them. And it does all this through very good character work and utilizes its genre setting to get this across with metaphor without having, there's never a moment where the message of the movie feels like a sermon.
Nor is it all like oblique. You know what I mean? It's never having you wonder like, oh, I wonder what they're trying to get at here. No, there's really no fucking question. But the movie, you know, like I said to you earlier, like it's not pounding the pulpit trying to boil a message down to a catchphrase. That's not what it's about. Like nobody says the word gaslighting in the movie.
Right.
Because it's more about the act and what it means. You know, it's not about the vocabulary. It's about, you know, how is this person feeling? What does it mean to them?
The emotion.
Yeah. What is it going to cost them in their life? What is it going to mean for the rest of their life? You know, these are the things that the movie is thinking about, and it's a decidedly mature approach to it.
Yeah. And I don't want to, you know, we've done, I'm sure people listening can look up the recent movies we've done where we've talked about this issue. It's not the messages that we have problems with. It's the ways in which they're being delivered. The Invisible Man should be a crash course on this is how you use genre storytelling to deliver a very clear message while still telling a good story and making it about characters, not catchphrases.
Agreed. I know you're trying not to point fingers. I'm trying not to do the same thing, but yeah, it's pretty obvious what we're talking about if you listen to the show.
Sure, but we've pounded the pulpit on that issue enough.
Sure.
So let's talk about the absolutely wonderful sequence in the sanitarium.
Sanitarium's a bit of an outdated term. I think Cure for Wellness shows a sanitarium. This is a psychiatric ward or a...
Oh, I'm sorry. I should use the more politically correct term, nut house.
Yeah, it's a nut house.
So at the
rubber room.
At the nut house where they're holding Cecilia, she decides to attempt suicide because she's like, okay, then I'm not going to let you have me, Adrian, and you're not going to have this baby, knowing that he will not stand for that, and stops her, which reveals himself to her, and she's able to stab him with this pen that she stole from Adrian's brother. And this causes his suit to start to go on the fritz.
Yo, the blinking man is even scarier than the Invisible Man.
Well, because we finally get we've seen the suit fully revealed on a mannequin earlier, but when we see it in motion as a person and there's just spots of it that are blinking in and out of existence, this seems like such a simple effect, but goddamn is it super cool.
It's not only an astounding effect, but the way that they blend it with the awesome stunt work, the really great fight choreography, the incredibly well cut together and well photographed action, like... Damn is this sequence in the hallway good. And normally I can't stand like, oh, it's a fight in a hallway. Usually these kinds of scenes are very boring. This one ain't.
Well, everybody's tried to replicate that old boy energy for the last, decade and a half or whatever. And this is showing that you can still find intriguing new ways by utilizing your unique concept to do something interesting with that. And this is a great little scene where Adrian basically takes out a endless amount of security guards. Then this leads to what we think is going to be the climax, in which the Invisible Man is going to hurt, probably kill Sydney as retribution against Cecilia. And oh man, does James get a beat down in this scene.
The Invisible Man beats the hell out of poor James in the scene. I mean, the shots where he has kind of, given up or passed out or, been knocked out, and the Invisible Man is pulling him up by his necktie up toward the camera is so brutal.
Yeah, it's brutal without being like, there's a lot of blood, but it's never, this is an R-rated movie.
It's not an especially gory movie, but it's plenty bloody.
There's enough gore effects to earn the R rating, but it's not a gorehound flick by any means.
Sure.
So during this, Cecilia eventually comes and saves the day, shoots the Invisible Man, take off the mask. Oh, it's been the brother. And I think this is being played as a potential twist that no, Adrian has really been dead this whole time. The brother was the one doing all of this.
I know my audience picked up on the whole, like, oh, it's a twist thing, because some of them went, oh.
This is, I think, going to be a divergence point for the two of us, because after this is revealed, we go to the police station and James, who's a cop, is saying, oh, it was him. We've got the body. He was the invisible guy going around doing all this stuff. And Cecilia's not having it. She's like, no, I know it was Adrian doing all of this to me. It was his brother this specific time, but it was Adrian doing this. I know him. I know it was him. And I'm not going to be safe until he's gone, because it's revealed that, oh, Adrian is tied up in the basement of his house. She's like, nah, he staged that. I know him. I know what he's doing.
Well, and we also know that there's more than one suit. So
sure. But I really believe that this is an attempt to potentially twist the normies and to maybe even set it. It's like, well, was it really the brother this whole time? And is Cecilia going to be revealed to still be crazy and traumatized? And is she going to do something that will potentially be a bummer ending for her character because she can't get this out of her head that it's Adrian? I see the movie going for that, and I think it does the due diligence to earn that section of the audience. I believe, and I think you and I are in the same boat, that because we're with Cecilia the whole movie, we see everything from her perspective, and we believe her before anybody else does because we see everything happening to her. We believe her 100% when she's like, no, it's Adrian.
Well, yeah, duh.
This is a little bit of a crisis of, I don't want to say being written into a corner by having this brother reveal, but I think they realize, like, if we do that, there are people who are going to think it was him the whole time.
Right. Yeah.
So we've got to try and state that as best as we can. Our best option is to state it from Cecilia's point of view, and hopefully the audience up to this point believes her, because that's been our whole mission statement. But because of this, like you said, the movie kind of has to go into Act 5.
So we know that at this point, if the movie is going to deliver some sort of satisfying ending, that it has to poetically kind of close the loop. There has to be some sort of rhyme. There has to be some sort of sense of justice for what Adrian has done to Cecilia. And so one of the best ways that movies know how to do that is to kind of take a prior moment and flip it and invert it so that the asshole can get a taste of his own medicine. This scene set across a dinner table between Cecilia and Griffin. What's his fucking name?
Adrian
Griffin, douchebag McGee. This is a really well executed bit of stage drama, essentially.
Well, this is where I was so happy, because when I was like, okay, we're not going to get Adrian as a person. He's just going to be this monster. Having this scene, getting to see Oliver Jackson Cohen be present and have a actual visible presence, and seeing how his body language, how his facial reactions, and immediately I'm like, yeah, he's lying through his teeth. He is such a clear, smug asshole. And I like that he's playing the part of the victim, and he's saying all the things that he thinks he's supposed to, that I didn't treat you the way you should be treated, and all of this. And Cecilia's telling him, all I want from you is to tell me the truth. If you want to be a part of this child's life, you just need to admit what you've done. Cut to James is in a parked car somewhere far off, and it turns out that Cecilia's wearing a wire, and they're trying to catch him on tape. And of course, he doesn't believe that he's being monitored, but he just continues to gaslight her. So
one of the cool things about the scene is where we start to see that inversion of, she's actually employing what could be called manipulative tactics against him.
And of course, because earlier in the movie, when she took a suit and stashed it away. She eventually steps away from the table, but not before the line revelation that I love is that she starts crying. She becomes overcome with emotion, and Adrian walks over to her and tries to comfort her. And he says something to the effect of like, the fact that something shouldn't be a big surprise.
Yeah, he says, I know you better than anybody. That shouldn't come as a surprise.
And the surprise delivery, because Leigh Whannell's a good writer with good setup payoff. We saw the surprise text message when she went in the attic, when she gets admitted to the psychiatric ward, and we don't see him. He's still in the invisible suit. When she's finally left alone, you just hear him go, surprise. And so this delivery of that line is like, if there was any doubt in any audience member's mind that it wasn't him, this is it. And now we can have our righteous vengeance.
And so she slits his fucking throat.
And another, I didn't gasp, I cheered at this moment because she is like, okay, I've been crying, I should go clean up. I'm like, she's going to get that fucking invisible suit. And we don't see it. We see her walk off. She walks into the bathroom. We cut back to Adrian. He's just kind of farting about at the dinner table. And then all of a sudden, zip, bang, boom, he's got a knife in his hand and he slits his own throat. And Cecilia, which again, this has all been set up. We didn't even talk about the great setup and payoff that's throughout all of this movie. That Adrian's house has all these security cameras and she knows exactly which ways they face. That's all set up in the very opening sequence when she's trying to escape. She's got to disable all the security cameras and she points one towards the bedroom to make sure she can watch him still sleeping. So she makes it look like on the security footage that he slit his own throat. And so she comes back into the room and is, oh my God, I got to call 911. My friend, he's trying to kill himself. And then she sees the camera and she knows exactly how far to walk to be out of frame of it. So she can sit there and just fucking gloat over his bleeding, stuck pig corpse.
That change in performance when she hangs up the phone and she knows she's not on the camera anymore, where she hangs up the phone and she turns off the whole, performance and just looks at him like, I got you, motherfucker. I was like, yeah, this is fucking good.
Oh yeah. And it's just so wonderful. I mean, we didn't talk a whole bunch about Moss's performance because it's just like, yeah, we know she's a great actress. She's really proven it once again in this. She absolutely has to be the anchor of the movie. And she knows, while she does have to go into hysterics when she's genuinely distraught, like after being set up for the murder of her sister, I don't think this ever goes to a place of full-on histrionics or overacting. She rides the line so well.
Here's a question for you. What's the difference between hysterics and histrionics?
I would say
hysterics is gendered.
Well, I guess. Histrionics, I would define my own personal definition as it has an element of not just melodrama, but it is over the top in terms of performance.
Sure. But this flick, like you said, melodrama, it uses that melodrama. It knows when to bust it out as a tool. The score knows when to go full melodrama. It's the breaking down and the wailing and the sobbing and stuff. It's like, yeah, the movie does go there, but it's never distasteful and it never feels wrong for the moment.
Yeah, but it never gets to a point of the only way I can define this for me is like, why? Oh, why?
Sure, yeah.
It never goes to that area in terms of the writing or the performance for Moss. Like, she knows exactly how big to go without ever coming across as unintentionally campy or way too big, I mean, I think the most she freaks out is after her sister's been killed and she's being dragged into the psychiatric ward and she's saying, no, he's here, he's in the room. And that is a totally viable point to be going that big, but it never feels like, it feels like she's being genuinely insane, not acting for the nosebleeds.
Sure. Yeah. In case you couldn't tell, we're pretty much head over heels for this flick. It kind of fucking rocks.
As of right now, this is the best movie I've seen this year.
Yeah, I highly suspect it'll be in our top 15s. It's going to take a lot to talk it out to knock it out of our top 15s this year.
Mm-hmm.
I am quite impressed. Quite impressed.
I'm so glad that if Tom Cruise's, or I should say Alex Kurtzman's The Mummy had to be the sacrificial lamb to get us this movie, by all means, I'm so happy for all of the not properly sound mixed trailers that leaked out of that, because this understands the horror of the concept, that it's like, we don't have to tell the same story again. We don't have to make something that's going to be the next MCU or big tentpole universe thing. Let's just find a filmmaker and a storyteller who can take the very simple concept, literally pretty much just the title. I mean, there's things that the name, I think Griffith is the name that's been in the, all the way back to the H.G. Wells, novel and everything. But otherwise, it's like, let's just take the concept and find a story that fits inside that concept. And in that regard, I think this is an absolute home run. But on top of that, it's fantastic filmmaking. It's great casting and performance. It's wonderful writing. It is a really astounding little horror movie. And I say little, and I don't mean it to sound dismissive, because this is a small movie, both budgetary wise and scope and everything, but it makes itself feel so much bigger and badder than I think anybody was expecting from something as kind of low key as this might seem on the surface. It's an absolute stunner, and we can't recommend it enough.
High praise. Okay. If you wanted to find out something else about this whole Invisible Man genre, if you wanted to find out something kind of related to this, you would head to The Shelf. The Shelf is where we pull off recommendations or perhaps substitutions or pairings for the film we're reviewing. So, Drew, what are you pulling off the shelf?
Well, before I do want to encourage everyone listening to go to genrevision.com and comment on the post for this episode with their own shelf picks. And we always feature those in the following week's episode. Well, I of course I would say there are other invisible movies, that, especially something like Hollow Man, which I love, but I went a very different route. If you want to see a movie that stars a female protagonist who cannot see the specifically men that are tormenting her, I recommend a movie called Wait Until Dark. This is directed by Terrence Young, originally from a play by Frederick Knott. And quick anecdote thing, this was the play when I was in high school theater program that I was always pushing for us to do as the yearly play. Never happened.
It's a great play. It's also a fucking fantastic movie. My God.
Yes, and the basic story is that Audrey Hepburn is playing a blind woman, and these thugs are trying to find this doll that's hidden in her apartment that has heroin in it. And these thugs are playing all these tricks on her. I think at one point they say that they're police officers, and they all have different personalities. Some of them are just like, look, we can fool this woman. She's blind. We can totally fool her with what we're doing and get what we need to get here with no trouble. But then there's the character named Rote, played by Alan Arkin. And he is terrifying.
He's, I won't say a complete fucking monster, but definitely monstrous.
And there is a fantastic jump scare in this movie.
It's one of the best jump scares in all of horror cinema.
Absolutely. And the play is famous for, after a certain point, the lights completely go out, and the only lighting, because in the actual context of the story, the lead character, whose name's Susie, she cuts all the lights so that her attackers are also blind. And in the play, I think at certain points, it's just whatever natural lighting's left in the scene is what plays out. It's like a refrigerator opens, and that's the only light that's lighting the scene and stuff like that. Very cool stuff. An absolute classic of a movie. If you've never seen Wait Until Dark, you are missing out. Travis, what are you going to pull off the show for Leigh Whannell's The Invisible Man?
Well, I don't recommend this as a substitution at all, but I do recommend it as kind of a soft recommend, and that is John Carpenter's Memoirs of an Invisible Man. This was released in 1992 to very poor critical reception and also bad financial performance. It stars Chevy Chase as a asshole executive.
Oh, shocking.
Yeah, right? Perfect fit. As an asshole who gets turned invisible after an industrial accident at a laboratory. And the interesting wrinkle about this is he gets tracked down by this murderous CIA operative played by Sam Neill. I mean, Sam Neill is the bad guy in a movie. The movie can't suck all that bad.
I did not know that about this movie.
And he plays this villain who is trying to hunt down this invisible man because he wants to use the invisible man as a spy asset, which makes sense. This is based on a novel. It's certainly not really all that based on the H.G. Wells stuff, although the film adaptation does take elements from the H.G. Wells adaptation, the 1933 Universal film, and use that kind of stuff just, to pay homage to the OG. But it's got a Scream Factory remaster, and it's a John Carpenter movie, so it can't look like shit. Chevy Chase's character is almost never likable as a protagonist. Daryl Hannah's character, the romantic interest, is kind of like barely a character in it. But just like the first Invisible Man, it's a pretty good excuse to put together some pretty awesome effects. And for 1992, like, this was a really ambitious effects film. I'd kind of put it in the same category as like Death Becomes Her.
Okay. All right.
Where it's like, yeah, it's not a great movie, but it's kind of an ambitious effects film that was important for the era.
Yeah, I've never seen it, just, based on its reputation. I've never had anybody give me a hard or soft sell on it, but you've piqued my interest, so I'm going to have to rectify that. It's John Carpenter, like you said. It can't be all bad.
Sure.
But for our listener shelf picks from last week's episode on Dragon Ball Evolution, we've got Eric Fuchs, who his shelf pick was pretty much along my line of thinking that I wanted to avoid, in which he said the good Dragon Ball Z and Dragon Ball Super movies, which in his estimation are Dead Zone, World's Strongest, Battle of Gods, and last year's Brawly.
Sure.
I could link to a piece that I wrote in which I ranked all the DBC movies, so I'm not going to go off on my tangent there. But yes, Dragon Ball Z movies are often a very fun time. Mr. Milksteak went with The Chronicles of Riddick, based simply on watching the trailer for Dragon Ball Evolution. He says, that was my instant gut reaction, so I'll go with that. I've not revisited The Chronicles of Riddick, and we've talked about that movie, you and I, quite a bit.
Well, I mean, I think ever since I saw the poster on the wall in 50 Shades Darker, I knew that it's like, well, this has set something into motion. The planets have started to spin a certain way. Like, this means I'm going to watch Chronicles of Riddick again one day.
One day. Someday.
Today is not that day.
No, for sure. But maybe that day will come and it will happen on this podcast. We shall see. And last but not least, Steven Nesbella's shelf pick for Dragon Ball Evolution was Super Mario Brothers, which I told him to go check out our schedule page on genrevision.com. We are going to be doing Super Mario Brothers fairly soon. So look forward to that. But yeah, thank you as always for everybody for these shelf picks. We love getting them from you. Let's do some currently consuming.
Nom, 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 nom.
Travis, what's been on your plate?
I had never before seen the 1933 Universal Pictures Invisible Man.
Well, now seemed like an apt time to do it.
Exactly. Now, no time like the present, so I did it. I owned it on Blu-ray since that Universal Monsters set came out, so it's just,
I was just dragging my feet on it. Kind of like we said with John Carpenter. Like, this is directed by James Whale, so you know you're not in for like a really bad time. You know it's going to look really good. You know it's going to be sort of stagey in a beautiful way. You know it's going to have a really enjoyable camp element to it in some respects. But I got to say, I think this is my least favorite of like the OG Universal Monster movies. The camp is just like shrieking histrionics. It's kind of shrill. It's so goofy. It is like, I think you said, it's pretty much an outright comedy for most of it, but then it has trouble managing a tone, like when he derails a fucking train and kills a whole bunch of people, but then he's like, you know, prancing around and like taking his pants off in the middle of the street and running away. It's like, what the fuck is going on?
Yeah, I think I like The Invisible Man, the original one, enough, but I think that's primarily because of the still impressive effects.
Yes.
And Claude Rains' performance. I think there's the one scene where he's, I think, sitting in his chair and he talks about the power I could have over men, like with this ability that I've got, you know.
Invisible Man can rule the world.
Yes, yeah. I mean, he's going big and stagey with it, which great, fine, because Claude Rains is wonderful at that.
Sure.
And that I think The Invisible Man is one of those things where the image is the movie, of seeing him in those bandages with those big particular, you know, solarized glasses and everything like that.
Oh yeah.
Like it's like, that's a strong, you know, it's one that Sam Raimi knew. It's like, yeah, I'm just going to steal that for Darkman because it looks fucking great.
Instantly memorable, you know, pure classic. Love the imagery in the movie. Again, it's James Whale. Fucking, you know, it's going to look good.
Yeah, but I'm with you in it. I think the comedy is oftentimes shrill and very bizarre. Not just in a dated way. It is that, but even at the time, it's like, I don't know. Is this the way you wanted to go with this particular story? Okay, I guess, but yeah. I don't know. I'm more a Hollow Man guy. So.
And the acting is bad. I mean, I know acting was different back in the 1930s and stuff, but the acting sucked. This is Gloria Stewart at her absolute worst. Yuck, Gloria. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean,
sorry, honey, but ugh.
She's got a particular shtick, and I know she's in, I can't remember which Frankenstein film, but she's pretty much doing the same thing, but there's a lot less of her in that. Whereas in The Invisible Man, she's in it quite a lot.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I'd have to, I mean, when you say it's your least favorite of the OG or Universal Monsters, I'm sure you mean just the first films, because there's so many sequels to all those movies that are.
Yeah, I'm just talking about the basic classic lineup.
Yeah. So, yeah, but it's one I've never felt a strong desire to revisit. I was like, I saw it. I'm glad I saw it. I got it. But
at least it's short.
That's true. That is true.
All right. So what, sir, have you been currently consuming? What's been on your plate?
Well, as we record this week, the first trailer for the Candyman sequel reboot came out, and I was highly anticipating it. Candyman is one of my favorite horror films of all time. I have a piece over on Bloody Disgusting where I argue it's a contender for the best horror movie of the 90s. I adore Candyman a lot, and this new version I was really excited by, not only from Jordan Peele's producing standpoint, and he's also a co-writer on the screenplay, but the fact that it was being directed by was it Nia DaCosta?
Yep.
And that this was going to be coming from perspectives of black storytellers. It was like, that's perfect. I really want to see that spin. And after seeing that trailer, I am still extremely excited for the movie. I think they're doing some really cool things with the concept. There's a very, I think, pretty obvious and direct connection to the original film, but this is going to be like the David Gordon Green Halloween, where you don't have to have seen the first one to see this one. That's why we're just calling it Candyman.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very, very stoked for that movie. But it got me thinking about the other Candyman movies, because I had seen the second one before and felt kind of middle of the road, whatever about it. I'd never seen Candyman 3 before. So I rewatched Candyman 2, also Candyman Farewell to the Flesh, which is a great subtitle. and was surprised to see it was directed by Bill Condon of Twilight, Breaking Dawn, and Beauty and the Beast remake fame.
Gods and Monsters. Speaking of James Whale.
Yeah, talking about James Whale. And Gods and Monsters is actually, it's probably his best film, at least the best of his that I've seen. Although he did that movie The Good Liar last year with Helen Mirren that looked pretty good. And Candyman Farewell to the Flesh was better than I had remembered it being. There's some good stuff in the script, like they actually say why there's a connection to mirrors with Candyman. Not that we needed that. That clearly is the case. In the original, we didn't need to know that. But the way they come up with it is interesting. They give the Candyman character a real name and explore a little bit more about his backstory. But the actual protagonist and the revelations that are going on are pretty boring. Also, Bill Condon doesn't seem like somebody who's actually interested in the horror of the horror movie he's making.
No, but I got to say, the whole revelation that the Candyman's real name was Paul Dano was pretty shocking to me.
It was really weird, though, watching Candyman Farewell to the Flesh, and when they asked him his name, he just went McClunky.
Oh, mine was better. Screw off.
So, yeah, Farewell to the Flesh. It's got some cool concept ideas and a pretty fun effects death for Candyman at the end. But not that great. I am currently in the process of watching Candyman 3, which was the only direct-to-video Candyman sequel from Artisan Home Entertainment. If that means anything to you, you know what I mean when I say it's an Artisan Home Entertainment direct-to-video horror movie. Those movies have a very particular sheen about them. And man, yeah, I got to finish that movie, I guess.
Enjoy the mediocrity.
Yeah, not great. The only interesting thing so far is that an art gallery plays a big part in the story because they're exhibiting the portraits that the Candyman character painted when he was alive. And an art gallery plays a very prominent part in this new version, which I think is very cool. There's one thing about the new Candyman that I still have to be sold on because they're skirting around showing him in the trailer, which I think is smart. I like that, keeping him mythic and a mystery, enticing. But now he's wearing this really bright yellow rain slicker.
Or something like that. Yeah, it's or kind of like a almost like a mustard colored leather coat.
It's very, very, very bold.
It's a choice, but I mean, they've messed with Candyman's wardrobe before. So.
Sure. I'm not saying that it has to be. No, it's got to be the exact thing he wore in the first movie. It's like, no, I'm not that much of a stickler. I was just very surprised that it's that bold of a color choice. Now, granted, you know what?
It's just, you're making fashion judgments on the Candyman.
Well, he's a stylish, cultured dude.
Don't be surprised if you find him in your mirror tonight.
Yeah.
Be my victim, Drew.
Oh, don't even get. And I will say this, because from what we see in the trailer, it looks like it is a Candyman is trying to possess or pass on his mythic boogeyman status to Yahya Abdul-Mateen's character. I really hope Tony Todd's Candyman, like, one last time, because he's, even in these sequels that I'm watching, even when the movies are crappy, he's so fucking good.
And he's still Candyman.
Like, he understands the tragedy and the poetic nature of this character. He understands that exactly. The only thing I wanted to tweet this, but I've tried to stay positive on Twitter more, especially when it comes to movies. I wanted to say, what's the over-under on Tony Todd being Candyman, but he's been digitally de-aged?
Yikes.
I'm very scared about that.
Dude, you just farted into this podcast. Get out of here.
if I've cursed it, I apologize. So,
what are the odds of the guy coming back who says, "We hear you're looking for Candyman, bitch"? Which is one of my favorite line deliveries in that movie. "We hear you're looking for Candyman, bitch."
Well, I mean, this is going off on a tangent, but especially when they follow up and they're doing the lineup, they're like, "Number 3, step forward, say the line. We hear you're looking for Candyman, bitch." Yeah, but no, I'm very excited. There's some really cool stuff in that trailer, as far as mood and style, and DaCosta she's, again, like we're saying with Invisible Man, it's like I see a vision to this take on the story.
Sure, this isn't some sort of bland slasher update. This is almost like, I don't know, the Velvet Buzzsaw approach for this movie. It's like, oh, okay, I am here for this.
Well, don't say that, because that movie was very not good.
That movie was not good, but it was really intriguing in concept.
Sure. So I'm stoked for it. We're going to be covering the new Candyman on the podcast, so we hope you're all excited for it too. But let's close things out with our
Comment of the week.
And this comes from loyal listener Eric Johnson, who was saying, sorry that this comment isn't about the main feature about Dragon Ball Evolution, as it's not really my cup of anything. But as a fan of the Shaw Brothers and their kung fu output, I had to investigate the trailer for The Boxer's Omen, which is going to be the movie we're doing next week as a start of our kind of new periodical series called Global Gonzo, where we're looking for international films that are gonzo, just crazy, out there, really ridiculous stuff.
Unmissable stuff. Can't miss it. Gotta see it.
Exactly. And Eric Johnson, because all I've seen of The Boxer's Omen so far is the trailer that we dug up on YouTube. And he makes an interesting comparison. He says, strangely enough, I wonder if this might have been the picture that caught John Carpenter's eye to make Big Trouble in Little China. And I see where he's coming from, because this looks that kind of kooky and cartoony and out there. And we're so stoked for this movie. I really hope you all will show up next week to listen to The Boxer's Omen, because we haven't seen it at this point. And it is one of the movies I'm most excited to watch this year after just discovering it a couple weeks ago. And I really think this idea of Global Gonzo is going to, like we do stuff like versus movies or theme months, is going to be something that we can continue to come back to. And if you have recommendations for Global Gonzo entries, please post them in the comments for the Boxer's Omen episode, because we have a list that we're keeping, and we want to keep that list growing and growing. So we hope you'll join us next week as we kick off Global Gonzo with The Boxer's Omen from the legendary Shaw Brothers. As always, we want to thank you so much for listening. I'm Drew Deach.
I'm the Invisible Man.
And we won't see Travis next week, apparently.
This is an audio format, so.
But you will hear us next week right here on Genre Vision.